Okay, so today we're going to do a quick little tutorial on fabric painting with stencils. Um, Regular painting on not fabric with stencils is basically the same thing, but there's a little bit more to it when you're doing it with fabric. You want to start off with your stencil. This might look familiar to some of you, which in my case I was able to trace this shape off of a poster. You can print a picture out or draw your own. And I traced it with pencil on a piece of tissue paper, and then I went over that piece of tissue paper with Sharpie and laid this over a poster board while I was doing it, so then the black lines came out, which you can kind of see here, visibly enough for me to cut it, which I cut with an exacto knife, just this simple kind of extendo blade thing. Worked really, really well. So then I ended up with my stencil and my little cutout piece here. So, first thing you want to do, well, you want to be able to see like where you want your stencil to fit, and then make sure you have a piece of cardboard or poster board or something thick enough that you can slide underneath, so that when you're painting it doesn't go through and make the pieces stick together and get on places you don't want it to be. So we're going to slide this between the layers of this t-shirt here. Make sure not to mess it all up. We want it to be folded perfectly on the seams here so that it's centered. Okay. It might help to pin this down, but I didn't really feel like it. Okay, so we want to line up our stencil with the center of the shirt, or wherever it is you're going to put it, and make sure that it is, so there's the poster boards underneath it. Which I think I kind of got it now. Okay. And then you're going to want to tape it down with just regular tape. Especially with this piece underneath, it's really curved. That might help keep it flat. Now, since these pieces stick up a little bit, I think they're small enough that we're okay, but just to be safe, I'm making a tiny little tape roll under here, just to stick under some of these pieces so that I know they aren't going to move around and mess everything up. So now that that's firmly taped down, we can start painting. I use this Tulip soft fabric paint, which is pretty much like the only brand that I've found of regular fabric paint that's not the puff paint. You can get this at any craft store. And then I use these little sponge brush doohickeys. These are kind of destroyed looking from some of the projects I've been working on, but they work really well. They get a lot of good coverage. You don't have to do a bunch of coats. Yeah, so I get a little paper plate, something like that, I don't care that gets dirty, that I can just toss and pour a little bit of paint on it. And roll up my sleeves, don't want to make a mess. When you're working with a stencil, you want to make sure you have enough room around it that if you're, sponging stuff down, it's not going to bleed onto the edges or past the edges. So it's kind of good to have multiple sized sponge brushes if you're going to be doing a lot of different stencils, because you might have some detail work that you want to do with a smaller one. But in this case, we can just use this medium one. So spread the paint out. That way you get a little bit better coverage with these sponge ones. You're probably going to have to use a ton of paint, but it's worth it. And then carefully just kind of sponge it on. Okay, so it looks mostly covered. I mean, it's not as opaque as I want it, but I'm going to go over it again with the brush. But the first coat is usually the only thing I do with the stencil. So now I'm going to carefully peel the stencil off. Very carefully. If it comes back down, I could kind of mess everything up. Awesome. Make sure you put your stencils somewhere that it will not make a mess, because it is wet. Let's get the rest of this tape off. Carefully. And just got a napkin here so I don't have to worry about it kind of spilling. It's actually turned out pretty well. You can see a couple places it got a little wonky. You can clean that up with water. And if it really doesn't work, I mean, you can just go over it with a brush, which is what we're about to do, but we're going to let this dry for a couple minutes. Okay, so this is dry for a few minutes. I kind of tried to fix this little bit there, but it didn't work quite so well, but that's okay, because it's easy to fix. We just get a little bit more paint. I got a small brush here. I don't know how well you can kind of see. This is just a regular paintbrush. It's not anything special. It's just something I had lying around for who knows when. But there's some areas that I feel could be filled in a little bit better. So I'm going to use this brush to do that, and also to fix this line here where it got a little funky. Make sure you have like a reference or something on hand so that you can see how to fix it. Awesome, so there we go. And we're just going to fill in a couple other spots here. It's also a good idea, let the paint dry 100%, and you will be able to come in again after a few hours and do another bit of touch-up. That way the paint will be stuck to the shirt and won't get picked up by your brush. In this case it's kind of okay because it's metallic. The metallic paint I'm now learning is a little bit different, but whenever I've worked with matte paint, I like to do like one little touch-up right after it dries for like 5 minutes, because this does dry really quick, and then afterwards I wait a few hours and then I come back just to make sure everything is completely 100% filled in, as opaque as I want it to be. But this one actually looks like we'll really just need the one coat and then this little bit of touch-up, and then I think that's all we're going to need. If you're working, like especially on a black fabric, with something like a white or like a lighter color, you're definitely going to want to go over it multiple times. It could be up to 3 to 4 times to get it perfectly opaque. And when I have that situation, I prefer to only use the stencil on the first time that I put the paint on, because as you can see, you do get a little bit of paint underneath sometimes. So this one actually worked out very well, but there's been a couple of other stencils that just didn't lay flat enough or whatever, and more paint got underneath. So when I left it on there for hours, it stuck to the shirt, and then when I tried to pull the stencil off, it got all messed up. So you can take the stencil off and let it dry and put it back if you want, or just do like I'm doing here and carefully go in with a brush once the main design is put on. Okay, so I think in this case we might be good to go. I might come back, just do a little bit of touch up later, but yeah, that's basically the gist of it. Do not take out this piece underneath until it is completely dry, which could take about 3 hours. Yeah, so that's all there is to it. Hope you learned something and hope this all made sense, so good luck.